Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hard Things Podcast. This is your host, Blaine Burgess. This is episode 41, if I'm not mistaken. And this episode's a bit of a double episode, kind of continuing the themes of last week. Yeah. Well, for lack of other thoughts, I'm just going to roll right into this. No filibuster, per usual. So last time we talked about fear a little bit. We talked about Interstellar. We talked about the Dark Knight trilogy, and I talked a little bit about orphans and why, even though people that have two parents watch a movie like The Dark Knight or something like James Bond, as main characters who are orphans, and why we still resonate with them even though we had parents. So starting with that, I think it's a common human emotion to feel abandoned. I think deep down we all have a lot of very deep needs, and I kind of wrestle with this a lot, but whether it's a romantic partner, a parent, close family member, whatever it may be, we like to think it's as simple as finding one person that can just meet all of our needs, but we're all also imperfect humans. And I think it's great when you meet someone that meets a lot of your needs, but it's easy if you have a history of maybe being abandoned in significant ways, and in some ways or another. It can get to the point where the resentment from prior abandonment can stick around, and you can kind of essentially add up all of this resentment and then let it out on one person, kind of, you know, kind of unfairly. Unfairly is like the only word that's coming to my brain, because in some ways, there's action and reaction, cause and effect. And sometimes when a person that we love, especially someone that we don't want to hurt, hurts us, abandons you, whatever it may be, you may not let them know exactly how you feel in the moment. And when you internalize that feeling, it just festers. And next time you meet someone and it's the same situation, that feeling might sneak out. Kind of be a unbalanced equation, if you will. Like I said, unfair. So my focus in the last year or so is finding ways to, let those feelings go, so as to not unfairly put them on people in the present day. And I think the reason that I've always, vibed with something like The Dark Knight, or Interstellar again. McConaughey has to go save the universe and leaves his family behind. So there's obviously some abandonment, some resentment, and we love these stories, and they make us like feel good because I guess it feels familiar because it's normal. It's natural for people to not meet your needs. It's actually, you should expect people to not meet your needs, which I feel like is kind of in a way like a form of surrender and taking your power back. And just a reminder that you can always show up for yourself. So I'll get into that kind of towards the end of the episode. But like I said last time, talked about those other Chris Nolan movies. And now today I wanted to kind of get into my favorite character, James Bond, JB, 007. Shaken, not stirred. It is very strange. I've always felt a weird sense of kinship with him, and I think every guy sees the womanizer Bond, and thinks to himself like, oh yeah, I'd love to be able to just talk to women and be a spy and get them to sleep with me and keep it moving. And I think that's a very poor representation of masculinity. Not saying it doesn't happen, but I think it happens because men have been abandoned in some way and have not recovered from it, and thus are not emotionally available, and causes us to hurt our partners, so women who maybe are emotionally available, who then become unavailable and then hurt other men and just perpetuate the cycle. So for me, I want to talk about how I kind of was stuck in that cycle and just found value in pushing myself out of it, because the only way you're going to find something real or have the potential of someone meeting all or most of your needs, all of your needs met, is probably not something you could find. But I think two very mature people who are genuinely in love can meet many of them. There's a couple friends and family members in addition to that can complete, a person's need for human connection. So hopping right into it, probably my favorite movie of all time, Casino Royale, the Daniel Craig Bond, who's also, in my mind, the best Bond. I recently saw his other movie. It's called Queer, which is pretty much the opposite end of the spectrum from Bond, like the womanizer type thing I was just talking about. In this movie, he's a gay man who's an expat. He's going around bars looking for men. He's writing a book. It seems like he's an author in the movie. They don't really get too much into his work, but he's just got money and he's living his life. And clearly, once again, has something very wrong with him at his core, some kind of abandonment. Something's driving him to seek these men in some form or fashion. And they don't really talk about it. They just let you see the result of his abandonment, which is desperation, and other kind of very relatable things. So it's really weird to see Daniel Craig in this role. It's very, very strange. Because again, couldn't be more opposite. But the movie Queer, spoiler alert, if you were going to go see it, this doesn't really take away from the story and the feeling of it, but essentially he meets a young man. He's rich, so he can afford to take this guy around South America. The guy's young and like good looking, whatever. And whether you're gay, straight, like whatever your orientation is, I'm sure you can see yourself in one of these two men. Either the person with means that kind of loves something beautiful, like even if it's a man and a woman, courting a woman, kind of feels the way it felt in this movie, even though it was a guy. And then being young and beautiful, you can also empathize with the fact that you have a lot of options, and you obviously want to get the most bang for your buck. Literally, sometimes bang, but you want to make sure you choose the right partner, the right person that's going to like actually take care of you in all kinds of ways. Provide for you, kind of on the surface level, but also take care of you and not abandon you in the long haul. So yeah, it's just a really interesting story. But they go to South America and end up doing ayahuasca. And yeah, by the end of the movie, Daniel Craig's character seems a little bit more well-adjusted. Like you have no idea really what he's up to for work or who he's seeing romantically, but he just looks more put together and less distraught after the ayahuasca experience. So interesting movie, but obviously opposite of Casino Royale. So Casino Royale, you see all of the big ego James Bond. He's playing poker. He's sleeping with women. He slept with the bad guy's, woman at the beginning, and then she gets murdered because of it, because she helped him. And, he's kind of just running roughshod through life until he realizes he has to go play this bad guy in a big high-stakes poker game. And the woman that the Treasury sends to basically handle the money for him, her name's Vesper Lind, she kind of catches him off guard. And I think he didn't expect to feel the way he felt about her. And long story short, it turns out she was also there with a motive. The criminal organization behind everything had gotten to her through her lover, and she was doing all of this essentially to save this guy that she was seeing. But I think James Bond also caught her off guard, so they kind of fell in love, and the circumstances of the situation were not ideal. At the end of the movie, he ends up winning the poker game. They're kind of in love, and the criminal organization kidnaps her to try and get the money back. And James won't give up the password. Turns out the password's her name. And ever since I saw that movie, my phone password has been her name. That's how much of a James Bond nerd I am. But yeah, that's the password for the money. And ultimately, they threatened not even to kill her lover, whom she's not necessarily in love with anymore. They threatened to kill James if she didn't give up the money. So she gave the wrong account number, and he gave the password. And you can almost see it in the movie. You don't really see this coming necessarily, but something's wrong. They have this conversation when he's recovering in the hospital at Lake Como, and she's clearly disturbed and knows that she's done something terribly wrong. But they end up traveling the world, getting together, and she ends up betraying him to save his own life, and she dies in the process. So everything just gets super, super messy, and this is where the whole orphan thing just spirals out. You don't have to be an orphan, once again, to have felt abandoned or betrayed. And that was kind of just James Bond's way, his own personal method of trauma. But we all have traumas. There's so many different ways to experience them, especially early in life. So for her to be doing this to save his life, he almost would probably give up his life if she would just not do it. Or if she could tell him about what was going on, maybe they could figure out a solution. And she just tried to handle it herself. At the end of the day, caused her own. I mean, she was dealing with this criminal organization who clearly wasn't just going to let her walk away. So, really, really tough situation. And it just so happens that's kind of how it happens in life. You fall in love with someone, and love kind of puts you in an impossible scenario and forces you to try to work your way out of it. And I've come to understand that this is a great way of developing yourself personally, making yourself super resilient. Even though it is painful, it's if I look back at my life, all the best qualities of myself have kind of arisen from these types of situations. So thankful for them, even though it kind of sucked. And now, as a 34-year-old, I have a lot more tools to kind of move through these situations, hopefully with more grace, and just have the confidence to still, stay emotionally available and go after love when it comes up. So anyways, James Bond, after that, that's the first movie in that, it's not even a trilogy, it's way deeper than that. Um, and he kind of goes on all these adventures. He's brokenhearted. So the kind of player Bond you met when he was gambling and sleeping with the bad guy's mistress or whatever, that guy's kind of gone. You kind of witness that just leave him. And the Bond girls that he meets after that, you start to see him take more of a paternal role, like more of a protector. It's usually a woman, like in Quantum of Solace, there's a woman whose like family was burned in a fire, and she's looking to kill the man that did it. And Bond basically just says like, hey, like, you know, I mean, this is like a beautiful woman, and like one that he would typically try to womanize, and instead they teamed up and they took the guy down. They took the, you know, spoiled the plans of the criminal organization. I'm just going to call it Spectre because that's what it is. That's what it was in all the movies that Daniel Craig was in. And yeah, you just see a shift. And then by the time you get to the movie Skyfall, so Skyfall kind of gets back into his homeland of Scotland where he kind of grew up before his parents passed. And it gets into this whole other thing about basically him like healing his relationship with paternal, maternal figures. The woman, Judi Dench, the lady Judi Dench, she kind of has a motherly role when it comes to him. And that whole movie is kind of about her as the leader of MI6 and kind of, I mean, spy work, government, organizations, these things. In life, there's always a winner and a loser. And I think, you know, she had to send people to their deaths. I mean, they're doing really dangerous stuff in the world to try and mold the world. And Skyfall is about an agent that basically like had to commit suicide, bit into a cyanide pill in his fake tooth in the back of his mouth. And it goes wrong. It basically just eats away at his face, like puts him in all kinds of pain, and he doesn't die. So now he's in captivity with the enemy and still being tortured, and also his face is ruined, essentially. And it was all over a mistake that M made, and obviously a mission that she sent him into. So kind of created this monster that she had to face. But in the movie, it feels a lot like, you know, politics today too. So the spy organization was kind of under scrutiny, and she was having to defend, you know, kind of some of the more difficult tactics that she would use, and they're just called into question, essentially. And so she's dealing with this monster, also getting questioned by authority and like if their program's even necessary, all this stuff. And they had this hearing. It's a really interesting scene. She talks about her husband loved poetry, and there was just this poem. Last time I read a couple of poems. So here's, like I said, this is a continuation of last time, and yeah, this is Tennyson, and this is his poem Ulysses, or an excerpt from it. So I'm just going to read it and then talk about it a little bit. Though much is taken, much abides, and though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. And I think that poem to me is a perfect representation of life, and especially life right now in America, like with the transition of power from the Biden administration to now the second Trump administration. As I've gotten older, I've just found that, as they mentioned, the strength in old days moved earth and heaven. I think as much as things have changed and technology has advanced, like human power resides in kind of the, if people that know me are listening, you're going to laugh, but the lizard brain, the limbic system, this very primitive part of our being. And it's easy to kind of feel scared of it because it is so raw and kind of untamed. But it's the thing that gets you up at sunrise, your circadian rhythm, your cortisol shoots through the roof, you go to work. It's the thing that you can get out a shovel and dig a hole and just go like harder, faster, longer than you could otherwise when you activate this thing inside your body. I think what she was trying to elicit there was there's new cameras and satellites and all these different things, but at the end of the day, it's kind of the down and dirty work that 007 was doing that really kind of saves the world. Like, a computer can't necessarily look at a human and tell if they're lying, but if you're able to be on the ground, you're in the same room as someone, you're questioning them, you can kind of feel out with your heart, using some very, very old technology that's like in our bodies. So if we're willing to listen to it and you can activate it, in a way, I think too about Bond and Vesper and the situation, like when you're in love, you kind of maybe don't want to know the truth, and you like know the truth, but you kind of ignore it, ignorance is bliss kind of thing. So I think the whole time, in a way, he kind of knew what was happening and just kind of let it play out. And that's a really tough scenario, knowing that you kind of have the skills to affect the situation, but having to let the situation play out, kind of surrender to it in a way. All you can do is invite people to allow you to help. Say like, hey, I'm willing to help. Do you want my help? And then you have to give space and let them do their thing. And really tough. But yeah, so that was my favorite thing from Skyfall. I want to say, after Skyfall, he then meets his kind of adoptive brother, who's the head of Spectre and like the bad organization, whatever. So he fights his brother. So he goes from like, meeting the love of his life to like growing into kind of like a more caretaker role, to then like healing his relationship with his mom, and then like through his brother healing a relationship with his like dad, or the kind of the masculine. And he ends up essentially facing his dark side, his brother, and putting him in jail. And at the end of it, he meets another woman who is the daughter of a man he once killed in an earlier movie. And, falls in love again. And this time, this woman, Vesper kind of had, an above average amount of the traits that he was looking for. She was kind of duplicitous. She was double agenting as well. But then he meets the daughter of this guy who was high up in Spectre, and she has like basically all of her dad's best qualities as like a duplicitous criminal, and then also all the great qualities of like a woman, like what you would think of, like a very nurturing, loving type person, but very broken from having a criminal as a dad. So in a way, like very much so perfect, even more perfect, you could argue, than Vesper. But then you get into the last movie. So the last movie that he was in was No Time to Die. And spoiler alert, he dies at the end of it. I'm going to get into that. But it starts the movie with he's with Madeline, the new woman, and he goes to Vesper's grave to kind of let it go. Because that whole time he had been holding on to resentment. And she kind of asked him, like, hey, I need you to let go of this. Then, of course, Spectre drives a wedge between him and Madeline by basically insinuating that she was behind like an attempt on his life at Vesper's grave. And so, yeah, they get driven apart. And he kind of goes back to doing a sad boy thing like he was in Quantum of Solace. You know, he lost Madeline, so he's back in his old pattern, but still not necessarily womanizing like he was before in Casino Royale. Just sad boy era kind of thing. And at a certain point in the movie, he figures out that Madeline got pregnant and they had a daughter. And this is kind of the final evolution of Bond. After he's kind of faced his like 4 or 5 horsemen and brought it full circle, and even had a falling out with the actual love of his life, you know, then he meets this kid and she, you can tell it changes him. He just knows that that's his daughter, and like as much of a stone cold assassin that he is and been betrayed like 100,000 times, you know, he just kind of naturally falls into that role of, you know, dad protector, and he's not necessarily the guy that's gonna do the white picket fence thing. But it was interesting to see how Daniel Craig played that, and I thought it was fantastic. So now the kind of final thing, so his brother gets rolled into this thing. Essentially, the villain had his whole family killed by Spectre. So he starts the movie by killing all of Spectre, like the whole entire criminal organization, including Bond's adopted brother. And it's kind of like the biggest threat there's ever was, but in a way too, it was Spectre was kind of haunting, literally haunting James Bond these entire movies, and all of a sudden they were just gone. Someone just came in and wiped them out like it was no problem. So it seems like, okay, he has a kid now, all of his problems are gone, but that just like didn't end up being the case. You know, this organization needed to be stopped. So he could have technically kind of walked away, like none of this was necessarily his problem, but he took it upon himself to try to save the world, and he lost his life for it. And not only losing his life, but, you know, Madeline and his daughter. Again, he could have been selfish, and he wasn't. So I really love that movie. If you get a chance, you should watch the entire series. It's just like a really cool take on James Bond. You know, before he's kind of like the womanizer spy type, and this just put a whole bunch of other layers into it. If you want to make it weird, you can also watch Queer at some point in that journey. Maybe watch them in chronological order and like Queer at the end, so you just get the total opposite flip and your mind just kind of gets blown. But I'm going to end this episode with, we're bordering on damn near 30 minutes, so I got to get out of here, but I'm going to end with kind of Bond's obituary poem. Again, big fan of these poems and these movies. And I'm looking right now to see what this is from. I just have like Jack London. Jack London from The Call of the Wild is what this excerpt is from, and I absolutely love it, so I hope you enjoy. I would rather be ashes than dust. I would rather that my spark should burn out in a brilliant blaze, then it should be stifled by dry rot. I would rather be a superb meteor, even atom of me in magnificent glow. Oh, every atom of me in magnificent glow, than a sleepy and permanent planet. The proper function of man is to live, not to exist. I shall not waste my days in trying to prolong them. I shall use my time. And this kind of brings it full circle for me. The perfect summation of what fear can do. I think fear can cause dry rot. It can cause sleepy, permanent planets. And wasting your days trying to prolong them. There's a lot of folks in the world right now who are in their 70s, 80s, 90s. I went to my grandma's nursing home over winter break, and every time I go there, I see people who are alive, but not really living. Maybe feeling the result of decades of trauma, and instead of trying to transcend it, just kind of married to their pain in a way, physical and mental and emotional. And it makes me really sad, because a half-life is a life not lived. I was joking with somebody, but I feel like just 2060, when I turn 70, it's just time for ritual suicide, like the Japanese samurais, like seppuku. I almost rather put on an art installation and do seppuku, be like the last samurai, and kind of go out on top at 70, go out on my own terms by choice, rather than slip into old age with that type of half-life going on. I would rather burn out in a brilliant blaze and use my time. And again, it seems like cutting your time short, but I can guarantee when I'm 70, I'm going to have lived 3 lifetimes, and more than enough. Than more than I probably deserve. I mean, I always talk about this, but not long ago, life expectancy was about as old as I am now, and kind of some of the unnatural things that have come out of science allow us to live twice as long and beyond. And I just don't think a long life should be the goal. I think a full life, a life where you speak your truth, experience love and beautiful things, and eventually find your calling, like your passion, like the way I'm in chiropractic school, is something I'm really thankful for right now. So if I graduate from school, practice for 30 years, retire for 5 or 6, I'm going to feel content, and I'm not going to commit ritual suicide. That's not a real thing. But I think you can understand what I'm trying to say is, at that point, I will have lived a full life. And whatever a full life looks like to me at that point, it could be trying to run an ultra marathon as a 70-year-old, something stupid like that. I'm just never, ever going to stop. There's no reason to stop. Whatever you can do, you should do. You should use your time. So instead of being afraid and playing it safe and taking different medications or kind of doing unnatural things to stay alive, I'm going to just live my life, spend my time with my loved ones, and do activities that bring me joy, and keep it moving, because that's how you use your time. You don't need more time if you're already not using it. I always think about this. You got to do it for the people who can't. Do it for the ones that didn't make it. Don't feel guilty about it. Don't feel any shame, but only feel shame if you're not using your time to the maximum, loving all the people around you, loving the ones that you feel compelled to do so for. If you do that, you're going to go out with no regrets and with, honestly, just with peace in your heart. So until next time, this has been Blaine. We got kind of one more episode coming before I make kind of a fun announcement. So, yeah, we will see y'all next time.